Joining us now, NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans, former Democratic congressman and senior advisor at VoteVets, Max Rose, staff writer for The Atlantic and MSNBC political contributor Mark Leibovich, and national affairs correspondent for The Nation, John Nichols. Christine, they're admitting it. Finally, what everyone has been saying, tariffs are taxes, the consumer pays it. You know, at the worst, the importer pays it, the company swallows it. But the country that is exporting the goods is not paying those tariffs.
No. And look, Walmart is the nation's biggest retailer. 90%. Walmart even says 90% of Americans live within 10 miles of one of their stores. And Walmart last week saying that the magnitude of these tariffs are so big, they can't absorb all of it. They will try to where they can, where it's good for them as a business to, but they won't be able to absorb all of that, and it will be passed on to consumers. We're going to hear from a lot of other retailers this week, Katie, as they report their quarterly earnings. And, you know, Walmart sets the benchmark really here. So I am assuming we are going to hear from other retailers who are going to admit that they're going to have to start passing on higher prices as well. However, it's going to set them up for trouble with the White House because clearly the president does not want the optics of these companies saying we're going to have to raise prices. And that's what's so ironic, I think. You have a Republican president who is telling companies how to set prices. It's like something, you know, in Republican orthodoxy just was unheard of not very long ago.
And it's also what President Trump accused Kamala Harris of doing while they were campaigning against each other. She was saying that she wanted to go after grocery stores for price gouging, and they were arguing that she's trying to fix prices and that she can't do that. That's getting involved in, you know, the free market economy. But President Trump is feeling comfortable doing it today.
That's so 2024. We don't have to talk about that anymore. I mean, what's shocking about all this, though, is that it's clear the Trump administration loves instances where they can try to use their own perceived or actual executive power.
I like how you got big
when you started talking about that. Well, yeah, you know, but the vast majority of consumerism happens in the United States of America, small businesses.
Yeah.
So if Walmart's making an announcement like this, there are tens of thousands of small businesses throughout the country that are doing just the same thing, and they will not be subject to some type of power call from the Treasury Secretary.
I thought tariffs were getting a little easier to swallow. It was stabilizing out. The markets were doing a little better.
Well, 30% is still historically a humongous tariff, and that's for China. And if you look at Walmart's case, for example, the company told us last week that they already raised the prices of bananas because bananas come from countries with a 10% tariff.
We're not growing bananas.
We don't grow bananas. We don't grow coffee here. So there's this big push to the White House to say, like, look, the stuff that we don't make here, why is there a tariff on those things? And to your point about the small businesses, they don't have the balance sheets like the Walmart to be able to pick and choose what they can absorb a tariff on. I mean, small businesses, this is existential for them. I mean, they're either going to go out of business or they're going to pass most, if not all, of the costs on.
And one could argue that the 30% is worse than the 140%.
Why?
Well, because under 140 was totally unsustainable, and companies were either going to just completely leave China or it was going to go back to where it was previously. 30%, you could actually imagine this is here for the long term. It's not enough for companies to leave necessarily, so they're going to eat the costs, and it's going to get thrown right on consumers, which is a tax. This is a regressive tax.
So that is the question I had for you, John, which is, what did the administration get out of this? Because, I mean, we heard a lot of different arguments, but one of them was to rehome manufacturing. Is Max right when he says that this is not quite a high enough tariff to rehome manufacturing?
Well, manufacturing is broad. There are many, many different variations here. So you might find a company that determined that it would be cheaper to do production in the U.S. That'd be a company that probably still had a lot here and had moved some offshore. But Max is precisely right that the sort of big movement that you'd be looking for, reopening major auto plants, moving steel production back in a major way, the sort of thing that would change the economies of, frankly, a lot of battleground states. Now, that's not going to happen in this circumstance. These companies, for better or worse, went offshore seeking dramatically lower production costs, right? It was what was referred to at one time as a race to the bottom, right? Find the cheapest costs wherever they were in the world. They did that in many cases. Even with tariffs of this kind, it is unlikely that they are going to all come rushing back because America pays better It's a simple bottom line. And then there's one other variation here that I think is really important to keep conscious of. This is continuing to create incredible instability in the stock market. And, Jamie Dimon just had what were frankly jarring quotes as regards the concern or the thought that the market hasn't really begun to see the full extent of nervousness about tariffs, the full extent of concern about what could happen. And remember, if that occurs, that begins to throw off all sorts of planning for companies that goes beyond, everything we're talking about here. Bottom line, there is up and down always, but there's incredible instability. And that instability is not bringing jobs back to the U.S., and it's frankly not causing our industries to be particularly advantaged. But it could be hurting consumers a lot.
Yeah. Mark, let's talk about the politics of this. It is something for the president of the United States to come out and tell Walmart to eat the costs of his tariffs. You did hear Bessent over the weekend on the Sunday shows saying, yeah, Walmart's going to have to eat the costs, and so will the consumer. It's not what they had been saying. They had been a little bit more circumvent about who was actually going to pay for this, or they were like, Howard Lutnick saying, no, of course it's silly to even consider that a consumer would pay this. Of course, the export countries where there's going to be an external revenue service. I wonder what changed in the White House? Is it the poll numbers? Is there something else?
Well, I mean, you asked in the last question, I mean, what is in this? What does the president, what does the administration get out of this? I mean, the short answer is elected. I mean, they were telling a story leading up to this that sounded very rosy. I think most people would say very unrealistic, but to the average consumer, average voter, average swing voter, this sounded like, hey, we're just going to get this great economy again, like we did the last time, and this is what it all looks like. Now, of course, people, the people in the real world know that this wasn't true, and as the effects sort of dripped forward, it became apparent that they had to sort of talk in a very, very different language. And yeah, so as the fallout goes forward, they're going to have to keep saying things like this. And look, Walmart's going to do what they're going to do. I mean, they're going to react to the president the way they will, or Scott Bessent the way they will. But they're going to do what's best for their company, and it might not necessarily be what's best for their customers, but it might be the only way the customers can get their goods and they can stay in business. So I think that's what we're looking at going forward.
It got them elected, but it might not keep them the House coming up, and it also might lose them political capital at the very least, if not the next presidential election. Let me show you the ABC News Ipsos Washington Post polling, Donald Trump's handling of the economy. And this is a stark number, considering that, yes, again, you could argue that the economy got him elected. 39% of Americans approve of Donald Trump's handling of the economy. 61% disapprove. Mark, that is a big jump from where he was ahead of his inauguration.
Yeah, no, I was a little surprised. I mean, these are very stark numbers. And I kind of thought over the last few weeks, since he backed off on a lot of the tariffs, there might be some sort of polling relief there. But I mean, basically, look, Donald Trump has never been a terribly forward-looking thinker. I mean, he thinks in the moment, he thinks whatever is going to get him, whatever is in front of him. And yeah, the politics for Republicans could get really, really ugly here. And I've actually been pretty surprised by how durable these increasingly sort of worrisome numbers for the president have been. And I think it's probably not going to get better as some of these inflation effects come forth from the round of tariffs before.
Yeah, buckle up is what a lot of economists and people like Jamie Dimon are saying. Consumer sentiment, also not good, Christine.
Terrible. Second worst in history when we saw that reading. And it's because of tariffs and their perception that inflation is going to eat into their, disposable spending. I mean, people know that something's just not right in the economy. Look, they elected Donald Trump because they already felt that things weren't right, like childcare and some of these big costs.
But is so emotional, and the idea of the economy being good or bad can literally turn on an election day. I think the economy is bad the day before the election. The president that I want gets chosen. I think the economy is good the day after. It is an emotional response to see these numbers drop the way that they've dropped in this polling, I think that is a real surprise because so many voters tied their identity up and their hopes up with Donald Trump. And to see that drop is so stark, and the consumer sentiment drop stark.
And it's not just that specific number, too, like the University of Michigan sentiment. It's all these other sentiment indicators, too. Also, small business optimism and sentiment indicators. I mean, look, people know inherently that things are going to change. They're in the middle of a big change with how the U.S. is seen by the world and how the U.S. economy is with the rest of the world. And that's unsettling. And you can see all of that in those polls for sure.
What about the credit downgrade?
Yeah, that was.
Explain that.
Right. OK, so there are three major credit rating agencies. This is the last one to finally say that we don't have a perfect score anymore, that our debt is not a perfect score, a AAA perfect score. So it is certainly symbolic. It means that our finances are going in the wrong direction and have been for a really long time. And longer term, what that means is it will cost more money. It will cost more money to borrow money. And right now, 1 out of every $7 the U.S. spends is to finance its debt. That's a big chunk of money. So when interest rates go up, that means as a government, you have less wiggle room for priorities. And that's not a very good place to be.